Hello, and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we watched
Point Break.
And its remake, Point Break.
I had no idea this was a remake until we started making our podcast. I mean, just like, I feel like this could be said of like a lot of our episodes, but I was like, wait, there was a remake of this? Wait,
Yeah.
what? It was not good. Spoiler alert.
No.
But
I like that it's a funny bit, though. It's like we surprise ourselves on the pod as it's happening almost in real time. Like, oh, yeah, what? Okay, let's just do that one. That's great. That's a great idea.
Okay, the first one is super iconic. I had seen it when I was growing up. My dad was a surfer. Like, I remember, like, because I grew up in Orange County in, like, Garden Grove, and he would make us get up so fucking early in the morning, and I'm not a fan of sand. Like, me and Anakin, like, we get each other on that point, right?
Yeah.
But sitting there on the fucking beach when they get up at the crack of dawn, and it's like the sun isn't even fucking out. It is like 30 degrees in SoCal, and I'm freezing my ass off. And my dad's just out there surfing, left me on the beach, and I'm just like, I don't know. So I had a lot of like daddy flashback moments. But yeah, I saw this several times throughout my life because I lived in SoCal. So you know.
And see, for me, this is literally I've never seen it. I've obviously heard of it. It's like one of those movies that straight guys love to geek out about. So for me, it's always been on my list, like many movies are on my list. When I would get to it, who even knows if I would ever get to it. But I'm happy we did it because I have a lot to say about it. But overall, I get the appeal. Whereas obviously the sequel is tragic. I mean, the sequel's just...
okay, but the sequel is a mess.
Remake.
But I am so happy that we are going to talk about it because there's no way that I could watch a movie like that and not fucking talk about it.
No, it was also another one of those where I was like, I don't want to be here. I actively don't want to finish this. Like, I don't care. They don't care. I don't care. Nobody should care about this movie, and we should watch something else. But
it didn't need to be Point Break. It was not. Oh god, I'm so excited to talk about it because it's so bad.
It was YouTube Extreme.
YouTube. Oh my god, that Monster sponsorship.
YouTube read the movie. Yeah, it's a shitty movie.
It really is. Should we get into the first one?
Let's do it. Let's jump into the first one.
Let's do it. After graduating from the FBI Academy, Johnny Utah begins his first assignment in LA investigating bank robberies. He and his newly assigned partner, Agent Pappas, begin working on a case involving bank robbers that call themselves the ex-presidents, who Pappas believes are a group of surfers. Johnny goes undercover as a surfer where he meets and subsequently stalks a woman named Tyler, who he emotionally exploits in order to get into the surfing equivalent of the Cool Kids Club, helmed by Zen Alpha dog Bodhi. Life seems pretty good for Johnny Utah, who now has a girlfriend, Tyler, a group of friends, a lead on a case, and, a new hobby.
Johnny sets up his first big crime bust, which turns out to be just that, an incredibly violent bust. Only after confronted with the deadly consequences of his assumptions does he start to see things clearly, realizing that his newfound friends are the criminals he's been looking for all along. He figures out where their next heist is and chases them till he hurts his knee, intentionally lets Bodhi get away, and angry shoots his gun into the air. He's then blackmailed into helping Bodhi with one last robbery, which goes badly. Another chase happens, a ton of people die, Tyler is there too, Bodhi gets away, Johnny catches up with him a few years later and lets him go again because he wants to ride the big boy wave, but it's okay because he totally dies from said big wave. So, overall, kind of a good movie.
Oh, I love this movie.
I vibe. This was one of those, to me, apart from some themes that I want to tear apart a little bit, I think it's well written and well edited and well directed because it at every moment there's engagement of like stakes, and obviously some things are like set up in a way that are like fairly obvious, but like at every turn it's like, oh whoa, this and then that, and like bing bing bing. It's a good movie. I hate, and this is how I feel about both movies. I think both are like judicial cop propaganda. Just because it's like this idea of like, well, justice is making sure we get the bad guy, but it's like, you've established at the beginning of this movie that they have literally hurt no one. They are stealing insured money from these banks that have way too much of it, and will be getting their money back because, again, you've established this money is insured. I understand that this is a crime, and I understand that you as like FBI agents are trying to stop crime because that's the whole deal with cops. Oh, supposedly the whole deal with cops, which we know is not true. But within that, the cops are the reason all of these other people died. No, rather, the cops are the reason that anybody in this movie died.
True.
It's that, like, they're the ones who instigated it. Like that cop on the floor at the that one bank robbery who's just like, to the security officer, like, hey, here's my gun, take the gun out. And the security guy's like, don't pull your gun out, you fucking moron. And the cop pulls his gun out and is like, you better have my back. And he's like, what the fuck? And then he just gets up and starts shooting, gets himself killed, and several other innocent people for doing what he would consider the right thing, when in fact it's this ego-driven hero complex that a lot of these cops have that inevitably just leads to more violence.
Well, and it's like you said, like these places are insured. And like I remember when I was working retail where it was like I was specifically told in loss prevention classes and stuff, like if somebody comes in and steals something, let them.
Let them go.
Let this happen. You know, if somebody comes and robs you, you know, give them the money, give them whatever. But like nothing is worth your life. And I was like, wow, this is coming from corporate America. It has to, like, wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, to me, I mean, and as because that is obviously the right thing to do. But on the back end, I understand that it's to prevent lawsuits. And that's the only reason. They don't give a shit about human life.
Yes.
They just don't want to get sued for literally hundreds of thousands of dollars because they instructed
19-year-old me. 19-year-old me was like, wow, that's wild. Like,
wow,
because, like, you know, never having worked a job or anything. Or, well, no, I did work jobs, but just not in retail. And then I was like, wow, okay, cool. Like, you know, awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you're right. Because, like, in the end, like, because that's a problem I had with both of these films is, so they want to get the bad guy, right? The person that is stealing, that is doing the bad. This is, like you said, insured money. I mean, like, let's take that out of it. How much fucking money does it cost them to chase these people down? They have a whole team that is dedicated to just this one case and just looking at some stuff and trying to figure it out, right? Not including the travel costs, not including the plane ticket to, in the second one, the plane ticket to Paris, you know, and all of this other stuff. Like, this costs money. Like, all of this, all of these people, all of these time, and they are paid well because they are cops, right? So why the fuck are we spending more money than what they stole on trying to get these quote unquote bad guys who aren't hurting anybody, who aren't like, and like, what does that cost? Like, the, you know, how many people die? How much taxpayer money is spent, right? What is the cost of seeking justice on these bad guys when in the end you just fucking let the bad guy go? Like, you're a bad, like, okay, cops are bad, you are a bad cop. Like, you are like a bad cop not because you are bad because cops are bad. You are a bad cop because you can't even do the job that you're supposed to do. So I have a really hard time looking at that cost. And
that's what's difficult with it, because I understand that, like, the intention of making the villains ethically complicated is a choice, and to that effect I'm like, okay, cool. Like,
it was a great choice.
You're making it complex, you're making it hard for us to kind of be on anybody's side, but at the end of the day the movie is written from the heroic perspective of the cops, because like, they're going through all these lengths, and like, even though he lied to Tyler and all of this stuff, like, he's still just searching for justice. And that's like the whole point of it, is like, justice will reign. So we meet him at the end when he spends however many months waiting to go meet him in Australia, and then meets him and he's
no, he goes to Fiji and then he goes to here. So he's chasing him all around the globe in these 2 years. Your tax dollars are going to fucking take him to Fiji.
And at this point he's done. He's literally not hurt anybody. I mean, at this point he has hurt people, but it's like, I mean, at what, like, because of that story, there is this intentional, like, we understand that ethically it's complicated on the side of the villains. However, we're painting these cops as the heroes when in fact they're the ones who've instigated literally all the violence. Every death that happens in this movie is because those cops did something to affect that. And like whether it's the no-name cop in the bank during the heist, or it's Keanu, or it's his partner, Gary Busey, they're constantly the ones instigating it. And again, like that random heist with Anthony Kiedis and like all those other people who ended up just being drug dealers, and there was an undercover cop who was there. Like that was so, like, that death, not to say that like, oh, these people should have just been left alone, but like at the end of the day, yeah, leave them the fuck alone. Sure, they're breaking law, but laws are being broken at all times. From what we were seeing in the audience, these people aren't, I mean, I guess they've kind of hurt people, but at the same time, that death was unnecessary. Those deaths rather were unnecessary, and it was only because of a poor assumption to make this cop look like a hero. Like, I've saved the day. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to get them when they least expect it. And it was wrong. It was an incorrect hunch, and all these people lost their lives because of it.
They tried to put in this, like, sly line where, like, I think Bodhi calls them Nazis. And so, like, it's supposed to be okay that these people are being killed by the police, right? But the other thing about that, too, is, like, he's like, oh, they're Nazis. They suck because they don't get the spiritual side of surfing. So he wasn't condemning them because they're Nazis. He's condemning them because they don't respect nature in the way that he deems appropriate.
He's mad at them because they're not doing yoga, not because they're not supposed Nazis. And you're like, wait,
okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
If that's the case, let's be mad at them for sure. But let's make sure we're mad at them for the right reason. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. I would really like to get into so this film is all about the toxic masculinity and being the alpha and pack mentality and the whole thing, right? And it's really overt in the way that it shows that within the FBI, right? Where it's really explosive, they're really violent and abrasive, and, you know, the way that they talk to each other is with just like the most amount of aggression, right? And just like putting people down and the whole thing, right? It's everybody is constantly challenging each other for that alpha spot, right? Whereas the surfers, they also have that pack mentality. It's reinforced in really emotionally abusive ways that are so subtle. I've never gotten that before, but watching it this time, I was like, oh shit, like, okay, I am very down for this, because like while they're trying to like put off this like image of like being harmonious and spiritual and stuff like that, they are incredibly territorial. They are incredibly manipulative and exploitative and everything. Like, yes, like, cool, like, fucking live your life, and, you know, you're not you're not hurting anybody, you're taking insured money, fine. But that still requires, like, it still requires you to be living on other people, like, on, like, exploiting other people and their labor or in their work, right? Like, you don't want to work. I just want to go and do my surfer thing. But, you know, I'm just going to take this. This is what I'm owed. And, like, this comes from, like, this sense of, like, entitlement almost that we get with a lot of enlightened white characters will tend to, like, inhabit this, right? And exude this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
But, like, what does he say? Like, there's even a point where, like, you know, Bodhi is, like, going down, like, that road of violence because suddenly, like, he's losing control of his dominance, right? And he says, I hate violence. See why I need other people. Like, this is paraphrasing, but he needs other people to commit his violence, right? Because he can't dirty his hands. He has to get somebody else to do that, which, like, is very fitting for that character, where he's able to remove himself and he's able to say that he's good, or somebody else pushed him to this decision because they're challenging his masculinity, right? Or, his place in line. And like the way that they talk about surfing and the way that they talk about everything, it all has to do with domination over nature itself. The way that the surfers talk about, like, not even just Bodhi, but everybody, is it's like, they're talking about riding a wave and they're talking about what happens with their balls, right? And then they talk about, like, riding this big wave is better than sex, and riding this, like, so they always have to tie that type of dominance to sexual acts or sexual organs, or to things that, like, as a male, like, present dominance, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, oh shit, okay, like, I don't know, like there were some really incredible dialogue choices to like reinforce that on like these really nuanced like levels that I felt.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I do think like with the toxic masculine motif throughout, all of it was nuanced and intentional, because I did notice this right off the bat with Keanu, rather Johnny Utah, which fully what the fuck, but I'm very into it. Okay, Johnny Tsunami, calm down. Like, this is too much. But there is a level of like when he shows up into this very, very masked, very testosterone driven, very aggressive, very like suffocating space at the FBI headquarters. He's kind of like the soft outlier, what would be considered in that environment effeminate, even though he isn't feminine, but he's bringing this different energy that is literally the opposite of everything around him, whether it's his boss, who is what's his name from Scrubs, or Gary Busey, his partner. They're bringing the very expected, like, I'm a man and you don't get it because a man's job is and stuff. And he's just like, okay, that's not my deal, but that's fine. And so you're already getting this like different approach to like exploring male spaces. And then he's thrown into a space where it isn't cis male centric. And when he meets Lori Petty for the first time, when he meets Tyler for the first time, he's trying to bring that same energy, and he's like, oh, my name's Johnny Utah. And her reaction is like, who cares?
Yeah. And
then he's trying to like explain this whole like why he wants to surf and everything, and like why his family. And she's just like, is this going to take a long time? Like, I don't, whatever worked in this other space with these other people is not going to work in this space. Like, so it's instantly cutting a line between this like like exploring the varying of space, right? And like where it works, where it doesn't, and who this character is within both of these spaces. And in the same way, I feel like Catherine Bigelow intentionally divided like this is toxic masculinity in a faux liberal or a faux forward thinking perspective, whereas this side is toxic masculinity that is pro-capitalist and pro status quo and all of these things. So you're seeing two opposites, whereas like this very white centric anti-capitalist like villainry is shrouded in this idea that you were saying about like, well, we don't have to work, but then again, he doesn't want to get his hands dirty. So there's these two levels, but at the same time, this is very white anti-capitalist, because at this point, they're just stealing money for themselves to live. This isn't sort of like a Robin Hood thing, which they try to do in the next one, but fail miserably at. But I want to get into that way more. Yeah, we'll get into it then. But in this way, that's not what they're doing. It's not anti-capitalism because capitalism is bad. It's anti-capitalism because we want money and we just want to surf, which is in and of itself the sort of same ethos of like a Jeff Bezos or like any sort of corporate head. It's the same exact like, well, I'm not going to work, but I'm still going to reap the benefits of this money, even though on its surface they're not hurting anybody and it's anti-capitalist in that way. So I think it's really interesting that like there is this dichotomy of toxic masculinity in both spaces, but then also butting that toxic masculinity against femininity or like none of this is really queer, but something that is non-cis hetero. And to some degree, his experience with Tyler, even though that relationship is presented very hetero, there are levels to it when I was watching it that I felt like this is a little queer. I think it's because she's like kind of mask presenting. Maybe that's like, or there's a level of like with her character, it's written to sort of disregard femininity to some degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
there's no other women in this film except for the fucking badass that is fully nude beating the shit out of cops.
Yeah.
Like, fucking love her so much. Love. Okay. Anyways, but so Tyler, right? Like you said, she's a little bit masculine in like presenting, right?
She gives off like ambiguous vibes, which I like, which is like
ambiguous.
She for that reason it felt very clear. Like, she's not presenting either way. She's just existing in this very like sort of NB sort of space, and I'm like, I know, and I know that like they're not they're obviously not getting into gender identity in any particular way, which bums me out because I'm like, oh, it's right there. Like, if you're already talking about masculinity, you're already talking about cis male hetero shit and anti-capitalism. I'm like, just I know it's like 1995 or like what year is this, 91, but like just dive in. You're right there. Just go in.
I feel like, okay, yeah, like at the very beginning, I feel like she really does present herself as like very like, whatever, I don't have time for you. Like, you're gonna get yourself killed. Go get the fuck out of here, right? But in that same conversation you referenced earlier where she's like, look, is this gonna take a long time? She's like fucking annoyed and pissed until he's like dead parents. And then she's like, oh. Yeah. Like, okay. Like, and, you know, that's another incredibly manipulative thing that men will do is try to bond with you over trauma. So, like, she functions to contextualize how we should feel and view men in this film. And also, at the same time, to reveal men's motives and feelings because they don't talk about them. Because even Bodhi, who is supposedly like this, you know, Zen surfer guy, right? Like, he doesn't talk about his feelings. He only shows them through acts of like passive aggression and through varying levels of dominance. However he wants to control this conversation, he's going to do that, right? And the same thing with Johnny, right? I thought it was a weird choice too, to where like Johnny was going to come out to her and be like, hey, I'm a cop, right? He was going to say that to her. And then she's like, shh, no, it's okay. Because that's just what she's used to in this world where men can't talk about their feelings and where it's hard for them. So, but like, even though she's separate from this and she has like these, she recognizes toxic behavior and calls it out and removes herself from it quite a lot, she also like participates in it. And she also like, she kind of enables it by still being around these people that are still being assholes to her, you know, like sure, she's playing football with them and stuff, and that's great. And sure, she's doing this, but she has to, like, we never get to see her do anything that is even remotely feminine other than fuck, right? And like, or wear that dress. That's the only two times that she does like anything that she never does anything for her.
No. And at the end of the day, she's also still just the damsel, which was her whole purpose for being there. Again, she's written to be this sort of like counter hetero expectation, sure. But at the end of the day, she's still just used as a female prop within the story to allow the men to have these big motive or like character arcs and allow things to happen. She's a prop. She's not real. Just like most women in most of these stories, they're not real. They're literally just there to prop the men up to keep their stories going.
And it's so hard because like, you know, like she's presented as, you know, she recognizes like, oh, this is toxic. She's like, there's too much testosterone here. They're adrenaline junkies. Don't you give in to this. Bodhi takes people to the edge. And then she calls big wave writing she says it's for macho assholes with a death wish. Like, she knows what this is and she knows what they're doing, and they only come back like apparently for these 4 months that they're not surfing to like hang out and be around, and she's still kind of complicit in that. And I think like a lot of that is because that's just what is expected, you know, that's just that is the time. And so like, you know, really thinking about that with this character, it's like she really embodies a lot of what women were going through in the 90s, you know, like you had to be one of the guys and you had like, but you also had to like be a woman and walk this fine line, and still like she's still put through so much. She's put through mental abuse from both groups, from both Keanu Reeves and Bodhi, and through like physical abuse through Bodhi, right? Because of her connections with men. Her connections with men are what all she is in the world, like, is what it feels like.
It just bums me out because, like, you're right. Like, she is sort of inhabiting what you had to be at that time if you were female presenting. But even then, I'm like, it's still a story. Like, obviously, there are, like, really, really specific choices made to call out toxic masculinity or to acknowledge it and to acknowledge the dichotomy of, like, masculine culture and how it's oppressive and how it's toxic and how it's wrong and, like, how it can be nuanced but still bad and how it can be good and still bad, right? Like, this is a constant thing throughout, which makes the story really interesting. But at the same time, I'm like, you don't have to damsel her. Like, you could do something else. Like, you understand. You're not ignorant to the trope. You're not ignorant to the motif here. It's obvious. You're making these very clear decisions. Why damsel her? You don't got to do that. Like,
okay, and this is also like really, this really pissed me off because, like, the person that originally wrote this got $600 for it. It was supposed to be a Ridley Scott film in the 1980s, and it was in pre-production and everything, and then everybody pulled out last minute. So James Cameron and his wife, Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah.
They were looking for something for her to pick up, for her to option, right? And then they came across this, and even though they're not credited, the two of them together really did extensive work on this script to make it better. I just watched Titanic this weekend, y'all, and that is a fucking feminist as shit movie, and I never realized it.
Is it?
And holy shit, it is so good. Like, it was like, holy shit, this is a long movie, right? But then as I was watching it, I was like, this is not, like, okay, like, yeah, like, Jack is there, but, like, he's just telling her, like, hey, it's cool to be yourself, and she's, like, she's not damseled, she's the one that saves him. In the end, like, sure, he dies, and she goes on and lives her life and has a great time. She's an 80-year-old grandma saying, like, oh, yeah, that's me, weren't my tits hot? Like, you know, I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. You can do better. You can do this. So, like, after seeing that, I was like, if you made any changes and you still damseled her after this and this and this and this,
then it's a choice.
Excuse me.
It's a choice.
Ugh.
And because to me too, like, I look at some of these lines and, like, right off the bat, I know that this is, like, very abrasive language, but I love it. Where the FBI director says he's young, dumb, and full of cum, which obviously is just, like, a very fun line and obsessed with. But it's centering this very, like, toxic, aggressive, like, that's all that men think. Like, it's reiterating this not only is that what the chief's thinking about, but that's what he's assuming this young man is thinking about in this environment. Is just like, it's sex, it's misogyny, it's all of these things, right, in this very straight space. And
air
then,
got dirty and the sex got clean.
Yeah, like, so that's obviously, like, boys are dumb, let's move past it. And I'm like, yeah, I love it. I love that's why that inclusion's there. And then even later when Utah gets sort of like his in with Bodhi, it's because he catches a fucking football. He, like, catches the football and then Bodhi's like, wow, man, nice catch. You've got moves. And it's like, that was written into the script. That is so silly. That is so silly, and it's so real, and it just reiterates and like, it paints this very particular picture of male culture and how silly it is and how, like, how simple. It's so simple. It's so unthoughtful, and it's so all of these things, and in that one moment it's such a very particular, like, this is what this is. This may seem silly, but this is real. And amongst it all, I'm like, yes, cool, these are very particular moments. You're calling this out in a fun way to address, like, this is silly, toxic masculinity is bad. Like,
also, like, ageist arguments are bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, old school versus new school. Like, Keanu shows up, or I should call him by his character name. Johnny shows up, and he's
Johnny Utah.
Johnny Utah, right? He's like, hey, well, I mean, let's do this. Let's try this. And then, like, Papas is like, if I haven't done this in 22 years, you sure can't. And then in order for Johnny to, like, assert his dominance, he has to initiate this screaming match, right? So, like, he has to, like, and only after he yells at him real bad and they get into it, like, men can only talk about how they feel or say what they mean when they're, like, yelling. And that's just another way that they reinforce this is the violence within, like, the alpha dog culture of the cops.
Yeah, exactly. It's and again, you're like navigating through different types of violence as communication, and the varying severities of each in each sort of zone of conflict or confrontation or conversation, right?
The boss controls their diets. They're not allowed to drink to eat sugar, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? And then you leave donuts out here just to tempt people so you can make sure. Like, it's okay, that's cool.
It's so silly and bad, but I like how it's so intentionally done. And that's a part of the movie that I like, where it's like, yes, if you're gonna, like, obviously these are caricatures of people, but at the same time it's critiquing this culture. I like that it's intentional. But it's also like every and again, when we talk about choices, everything was a choice here, including damseling of Tyler. But then secondarily, what I was saying at the beginning of this, which was like reiterating this idea that the judicial system, the justice system as we know it, and this pro-capitalist, pro-cop structure has the final say of what is right and wrong, even in the murky waters of ethical ambiguity. Like, at the end of the day, this narrative centers around a cop who wants to seek justice because he sees injustice and wants to seek it. But it's like, this isn't justice. This is just what it is, and you have a hero complex, and you want to see this through for you, not for justice, not for anybody, because you've gotten how many people killed. That's it. And then even at the end, what bothered me so much, and I thought this was just a fucking silly ending, especially for a movie that had a lot of big opinions, at least initially. The first half of the movie, these opinions are huge. The second half is more like, well, we're going to just fall into gendered heteronormative tropes, pro-capitalism, pro-man, cool. Like, that's just kind of how it fell into play. But at the end, when Utah meets Bodhi in Australia, and he's like, I finally got you, and he's like, but this was a wave I've been waiting for, and Bodhi convinces him to let him go. He's like, he lets him go under the guise of surfer brotherhood. And he's like, man, we just both get the waves. And I'm like, how many people fucking died?
How much money have you spent trying to track this guy around the fucking world? Yeah. How many people lost their lives? How many?
At the end of the day, it has nothing to do with justice. It has to do with ego and this silly toxicity of what is considered like male bonding in this way, and how that is paramount, how that is like the biggest, like, wow. So it was just fucking gross. Like, and that bothered me so much. As a movie, again, I think it's fantastic. I think it's really cool, and it brings up a lot of things, but like that ending, just to reinstill cops are good, masculinity, it reigns supreme, and brotherhood and patriarchy is ultimately the strongest. And I'm just like, why is this the ending? Why are you ending it with pro-capitalist, pro-cop patriarchy? Like, you literally did so much work to establish that these things are bad, and then in the end it's like, well, you just don't get it. You just wouldn't get it because you're not a pro-capitalism male cop. You're like, what? That's it? That's really it? Whoa, okay, I guess I'll never get it. Like, what the fuck? Yeah.
So I have the exact same feelings on this, because that is bullshit. It's
so bad.
Okay, I want to zero in on Bodhi. First of all, Bodhi apparently means wakefulness, and it's based off of Bodhisattva. I do not know how to pronounce this, but it's a term in Buddhist religion that means enlightened being who out of compassion forgoes nirvana to save others, which is supposed to contextualize Bodhi and his journey and who he is. But I hate just this whole movie is just this weird entitled alpha struggle that eventually drives Bodhi to madness in order to like maintain superiority despite like how many people are killed. Like, and it kills him in the end too. Like, he says shit like, and this is why I think some of the writing was excellent for this movie, where he's like, why be a servant to the law when you can be its master? Violence is unstoppable. Fear causes hesitation, which causes worst fears to come true. Projects strength to avoid conflict. Peace through superior firepower. So when you start like getting into like these little tidbits that he says like throughout the film, like anytime like he let like one of these like little nuggets go, I was like, oop, boom, 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 and I wrote it down and I compiled them all at the end and was like, ooh, shit, this is gross. And then, like, when he first sees Tyler with Keanu, mind you, they're not together anymore, right? They were together at one point, I guess. And, like, you know, she sees other people, so does he, and it's fine. But he, like, sees her with him, and he's like, who's that guy? Are you replacing me? I'm a better surfer. And then he, like, flaunts other women in front of her. He's just, like, being super territorial. And then at the end, after he's taken Tyler hostage as a means to get Johnny to come and like do the heist with them, the whole thing, right? In his like impassioned speech, right? He refers to her as my woman. And then he has a line that where he says that she didn't love him. She only loved Johnny. And so it comes down to, even at that point, like he's upset because this woman who he like has decided is his didn't feel the same way that or she feels stronger for somebody else. And I'm just like, that's fucking gross, right? But like you don't get to see this until he is backed up against the edge, right? So then in that same way that we talked about earlier with the cops, right, with establishing dominance and men can only say what they really think and feel when they're yelling about it, he does that here. Right? Where he was trying to pose as like, oh, I'm good and like everything is cool and like I'm so chill. But really inside, he's just like, you are with my fucking woman. Right?
Yeah, it's not integral thought. It's more just like this posturing and this performance of this performative zen-ness as opposed to like actually anything that's personally transformative. It's literally just to show, hey, look how fucking chill I am. But deep down, he's still this misogynist who thinks he owns women. And you're like, well, okay.
And then, like, we're pitted against, like, you know, so, like, that form of, like, at first what seemed like good, like, a good relationship, a good manly relationship, right? And then Keanu still embodies a lot of that, right? And so, like, he is, like, you know, well, you pull the ripcord first. No, you do, right? There's all of these moments where they're, like, butting heads, right? And then, like, he yells, fucker, and runs off the plane, right?
Yeah.
Which is also just hilarious. But, like, in the end, we're supposed to see Keanu's form of alpha. We're supposed to see him as the true alpha, right? Because he is actually the one that is able to remain cool and calm or does things the right way. So it's the right way to go about navigating a male world, right? Because he got the girl in the end. He did the mutual respect thing where he let the dude go, right? Because, like, it's okay, you're a man, I get it. And then Bodhi got what he wanted in the end. Like, I don't understand. Like, what were the fucking consequences?
There were no consequences for any of the men in this. I mean, but again, the movie was all men, so there are no consequences. They both get to just...
Except death.
Except death for random and innocent
Which
people.
They didn't give a shit about, right? So, like, all of Bodhi's bros, like, they all die, and he's just like, oh,
whatever.
Well, we gotta bury him. Oh, we don't have time. Okay. And then fucking runs off. Like,
yeah.
Cool, dude.
Yeah, like, there are levels to that just really bother me as far as, like, story is concerned. Because, again, it was thoughtful, but at a certain point, that thoughtfulness kind of just went by the wayside to just establish, oh, this is standard for these movies. Let's just damsel her. Let's make sure that, like, the men get away with it, and let's uphold patriarchy clearly, specifically, elegantly. Great. And like, I'm looking at my notes here, and, like, even the way it portrayed cops, like, there were certain moments where I'm like, why are they? It's romanticizing and making these cops the hero because, again, they're after justice ultimately. But then it'll be like after the drug raid, the drug house, when they break in and all these people died. Gary Busey, his cop, Papas, he says, last time you had a feeling I had to kill a guy. I hate that. It looks bad on my report.
Yes,
which,
I fucking hate that.
Where I'm like, that's amazing. Like, yes, cops are bad. Like, this is perfect. Like, this is so emblematic of, like, cops don't care about human life. We know this. Great. You're writing into the story. You're painting them as bad, like perfect. But then you're juxtaposing that with like the hero who's like accepting this as truth from his partner and is just like, yeah, you
Good
know,
cop,
I'm
bad
sorry.
cop. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're both complicit in this way. So I'm like, you're saying this very particular thing about the infrastructure of policing and like how cops are bad. Like you're clearly and eloquently displaying this, but at the end of the day, there are no consequences. And I don't think that's an intentional narrative-driven choice to say that like that's just the nature of the world. Because again, as we know, and as she knows, as they know, producing stories like this and reiterating this within a narrative and like the cultural zeitgeist, people will see this and whatever portion of it will resonate. And if you're creating these narratives around this, people will see that, internalize it, and be like, that's how the world works to some degree. Because I mean, that's just how entertainment works. I mean, that's how we get stereotypes and tropes and all these things, because it's told in these stories so many times, it becomes integrated into people's beings, whether or not it's true. And more often than not, it isn't. So if you're making the choice to tell a story like this with these set intentions, and at the end of the day you just fall into complicity with the status quo, it's just so obnoxious. Because I'm like, you have something to say, fucking say it. Like, stop. Don't just dip your toe into it. Just like, you're so close, and at the end of the day this movie just ends up being another problematic piece of cinema. Otherwise, you did so well, and you're so fucking close, and you get way closer than like, she, with this movie, got way closer than how many movies have we seen?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, just in its way, because like obviously there have been a couple movies where like, wow, this is like really telling and well written, and like it had a very particular approach to like capitalism or racism or systemic oppression, like all of these things. Similarly here, so close, so fucking close, and it misses the mark completely with the third act. Like, it's just whoop, just gonna scoot all that away. I'm like,
yeah,
why?
It felt like it was so subtle. Not so subtle, but like it felt like it was more subtle than 90s cinema is used to. So like that's maybe why they had to like go back into like shitty tropes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I really, really, really love that dichotomy, thinking of it even more. I also really liked the way, like, while I hated this as a thing, like I liked how it showed Johnny and the way that he decided to target Tyler, as intentional as he was with that, and how he like made the active choice to prey on her vulnerabilities and exploit the fact that she did a nice thing for him, right? And then the trauma bonding, I liked all of that too, because that also felt very like, this is supposed to be our good guy, right? This is supposed to be who this is. But there are no good guys in this, because in the end he is still bad, and he's gotten where he was, and he got the girl, and he got all of this through means of manipulation and exploitation. Like, and these things happen so subtly, and they like, you don't even realize that they're happening, but like it's just like pushing the envelope just a little bit more and a little bit more every time, until like this completely unacceptable thing is now super acceptable, and it's fine, you know?
See, because to me, with that same idea, if you're going to tell this story about this toxicness, why not end it with mutually assured destruction? Like, get to that point where like, okay, Bodhi swims out and dies. I mean, I don't want more death, but at the same time, like, give Utah his same day in that way, where it's like they're both bad. I do want to, before I get to that point, I want to say, you brought up that when they were falling out of the plane, it was this constant like kind of like pissing contest of like, you pull, no you pull, no you pull. We were playing chicken, like this very male thing, to the point where like you're willing to play this little silly game of whose dick is bigger, and the prize is you die. Like, you're willing
to risk,
or
you live.
You're willing to risk your life to prove that you have a bigger wiener. Cool. What the fuck? That is so toxic and silly. But that, I mean, that's constant throughout, right? Like, Bodhi's trying to get away, and Utah's trying to find justice, and is constantly like, you can end this now. Okay, Utah, you could have ended it weeks ago. Mm-hmm. You literally, like, if you just stopped, these people would still be alive. This girl who you gaslit and emotionally abused would not be kidnapped. Like, you think you're doing this judicial thing when in fact you're the catalyst for all of these actions. And it's that pissing contest between the two of them that gets all of these people killed. So if that's the structure of the narrative, at the end, since that is inherently bad, both this, what would be considered the good guy being the instigator for this violence, and what would be considered the bad guy as sort of the reactionary party who's like, just leave me the fuck alone, I'm trying to bounce. But they're both still toxic and representing this very garbage patriarchal structure. At the end of the story, end them both, kill them.
Yeah,
like
that would have been cool.
Yeah, because then you're clarifying in a very particular way, this does not work, this system doesn't work, this patriarchal structure doesn't work, this ego driven male shit doesn't work. And we see that he died, we lost a bunch of innocent lives, all of this money is gone, nothing happened. There was no justice. Justice wasn't real here. It's not a realistic thing in this binary expectation of good and bad, because that's not how the world works. And with this level of like, I'm going to do this. No, I'm going to do this. No, if you don't do this, it's like that pissing contest. Nobody wins. What a great story that would have been, right? Like, kill them both and wrap it up with a little bow and say, boom.
Well, and absolutely. And they, like, by that same token, like, because you're absolutely right, the way that choice at the end was framed, and the way that the choice when he can't shoot Bodhi, right? The way that both of those choices are framed is that he's a good guy and he cares about people. If he cared about people, why did so many people have to die in that raid, right?
He would have stopped,
why wouldn't he tell, like, okay, sure, he can't tell Tyler that he's a cop or whatever, but, like, she didn't need to be a part of that at all in order for him to come along.
And it bums me out that they damseled her, because, like, that wasn't his motivation. His motivation was justice. I mean, and again, you could argue that it was both, right? Like, maybe he did really fall in love with her, which is what they were trying to, like, say in some of these scenes. But like you said, he would have kept fucking going even if she wasn't captured.
Yeah,
he needed his little medal. He needed his hero award. And he needed just, big air quotes, justice restored. Yeah. But that didn't happen. And so to me, I'm just like, you know what? If you're gonna kill Bodhi, kill Utah. Mutual leads to your destruction. The patriarchy is bad. Capitalism is bad. This idea of binary good and bad is bad. Fucking reel it in. I mean, as much as we're critiquing it, I did really enjoy it. I do think it's a good movie.
Did you love all the butts?
Oh, and that's also one of the things too, is like the whole, like, this really, really toxic cis straight man, like this ego testosterone pile of just like spew messy shit. She makes them all look at this like other guy's butt. And again, they're not in it. It's not written like, oh, they're doing something gay and that's the joke because they have to look at another guy's butt. That's not the point. The point is they're looking at it and they're just like, oh, well, shit, I guess like this is just what's happening. It's not really commented on in like a negative, like a sort of a gay pejorative humoristic way. It's just these straight guys have to look at this other straight guy's butt and then they're moving past it. But I like that as a choice, because I feel like without making that the joke, which would be gross and garbagey, you're still imbuing this like pseudo homoeroticism throughout it. Under the guise of toxic maleness.
There are so many times where I just wanted Bodhi and Johnny to kiss.
They're gonna kiss.
I just wanted them to kiss. I just wanted them to kiss the whole time. Just kiss. It's fine.
That whole idea, and that was also one of the things that I love too. Is like there were these really flirtatious moments. There were these moments of like, "Fuck, are you feeling this? Like, is this happening? Like, that's crazy."
I felt it. It was there.
And it's under this guise of like, well, hetero bromance bullshit, which is like, also, what a fucking shit term. Shut up. Like, sexuality is a spectrum. You can be attracted to like it's gross. It's gross and garbage and toxic. But I do like that these were very, and again, it felt very intentional. Like, they were kind of romantic with each other. There were moments of romance between the two of them. There were moments of like eroticism and gay shit. There was moments of just them like, ooh, you guys are so gay for each other. Just fucking kiss him. Kiss him right now. Do it.
Kiss him on the mouth.
Kiss him on the mouth. He thinks you're hot because you can catch a football. You think he's hot because of this yogi experience, and he can surf and you want to surf. Yeah, you think he's hot. He thinks you're hot. Kiss him. It's consensual. Say yes.
Fine. Yeah.
What the fuck? Johnny Utah is an extreme sports athlete all about the YouTube hits and his sweet monster energy during sponsorship when his most recent stunt turns deadly for his friend who was also doing the stunt thing. Johnny goes into a depressive state and begins training at the FBI Academy, where he will undoubtedly see more death because that makes sense. He begins his first training assignment in the field and makes a connection with a recent string of international crime and a thrill-seeker checklist called the Ozaki 8, which impresses his boss who lets him, the FBI agent in training, go undercover to do some recon. He goes to France and meets his assigned handler, Agent Papas, who takes him big wave surfing and parties all night on a trust fund kid yacht. Johnny meets the bad guys who happen to be the extreme sports equivalent of the Cool Kids Club, helmed by Zen Alpha Dog Bodhi.
Johnny forces his way into their group, and they go on a lot of extreme sports adventures in their quest to complete the Ozaki 8 and reach Nirvana. One of them dies, and there's a Viking funeral and a chrome house that turns into another trust fund party. He gets a call from his boss and realizes he's been gone for a while, so he checks in. And then he comes back to the group, and they try to get him to blow up trucks filled with gold, because that's an offering to the earth? Anyways, he reveals he's a cop and chases them till he hurts his knee, intentionally lets Bodhi get away, and angry shoots his gun into the air. He figures out where their next heist is and chases them, killing one of them who turns out to be this girl Samsara that he banged a few times. Another chase happens, but this time it's on a free climb rock in Venezuela, but Bodhi gets away again. Johnny catches up with him a few years later and lets him go again because he wants to ride the big boy wave, but it's okay because he totally dies from said big wave. There was a lot.
This movie fucking sucks. Just out the gate.
We literally start this movie on the edge. Oh my God.
It's Utah and his friend, and they're on these motorbikes, and they're going to do some big stunt, and it's like a crazy thing. And his friend's like, hey, man, don't you think this is too much? And he's like, no, man, my YouTube's going to go crazy. And he's like, you know, there's more to life than just YouTube. He's like, well, you don't know YouTube like I know YouTube because YouTube is life. And he's like, just be careful because I don't want my friend to die. And he's like, don't worry, YouTube will save me.
Also,
and then they go,
I like smoothies. So,
yeah,
you know,
if I break all my body, I can drink smoothies for the rest of my life. And then it's this whole thing. And then inevitably the friend dies and he's like, oh, no. And again, every single death in this is so glazed over. Mm-hmm. Like, death is so irrelevant here.
Even though, like, his whole, like, a whole cornerstone of this character is that his friend died. And so he's just, like, perpetually sad for 7 years, supposedly. Oh, yeah.
And,
okay.
And here's the thing for me is, story-wise, already from this scene, why is this person's death the causality behind joining the FBI? Like, why is his death the catalyst? There was no conversation previously about how, like, he's a bad guy and wants to now do good because this bad thing caused the death of his friend. Ergo, he's trying to seek justice. He's trying to, like, right his wrongs. He's trying to pay penance. But this makes no sense because there's no talk of that. There's no talk of, like, I've wanted to join the FBI this whole time. Like, there's no conversation as to why he's there. He just says, I'm here because my friend died. Why? Why does that make sense? Why does you being here make sense with, like, it doesn't make sense.
If he's so traumatized by death, why would he go to the FBI where there will undoubtedly be more death that he's either going to witness, participate in? It could be more of, like, the people that he knows. Like, I don't understand that choice. And
it's silly.
It makes no sense. And they tried, like, okay, Johnny Utah is a problematic piece of shit. Right? So, like, we start off with, like, you were talking about him being, like, this social media star, whatever. I'm so cool, right? And then, like, they try, okay, first let's go to that, like, one-off line about poor him because his education, right? I got my GE at 23 years old, and I finished college 5 years later than all my friends, right? Which, when you look at what that's saying, is that those lines are there to be like, oh, he's not smart, right? Or like, or
it's establishing him as a layman or as like an everyman. Like, oh, see, he's our hero, but he also fails at life. There's the expectation that these things are bad, and therefore those who have also done them can succeed. It's just audience surrogacy shit.
And yeah, exactly. It's framing this as negative, as like, like, oh, he didn't go to school right away. Fuck him. He sucks, right?
Yeah.
You guys, I have been working on my AA for over a decade, and I'm finally finishing it now because I've had to work for so fucking long. And like that line to me was just like, yeah, rub it in my face. Everybody I know graduated like 10 years ago. That's fine. Like, yeah. Cool. Like, what is this doing? What is this serving? Like,
well, it plays into the idea of pro-capitalism that this movie sort of, this movie is just right with this pro-capitalism thing. But on top of that, it's not even go to college, get into that. It's go to college with money that you have been given through generational wealth, as we see with like the trust fund boat and all of these young people in this like big yacht party, or like whenever there's a party in this like big mansion in the woods. Whose house is that? Why are we here? Oh, it's this rich guy who wants to sponsor you guys. Okay. How did you get these things? Like, this is such a rich person's story. All of these people are wealthy and well off and have literally never struggled with money. It's not. I don't like this movie.
Yeah. I agree. Like, this group is supposedly sponsored by like this super rich party monster, right? Like there's a fucking skateboard ramp on the yacht, which was pretty tight. I will admit.
Yeah, that was cool. That was cool.
But like every other time, like they're like, oh, we don't need anything. Like we don't own anything. We just are trying. Like we're doing the Ozaki 8 to try to like. I don't understand what it was like. Okay, nature is going to give us this, and then we have to make a sacrifice to nature for that. And I was like, okay, but like they do things like, okay, that whole thing just this movie hurts my brain.
It's well, because initially, it doesn't know what it wants to be. Like it's trying to find all of these different avenues into like, so off the bat, we're seeing he's joined the FBI after his friends died. There's this new band of robbers who are going to these different countries, so it's intercontinental, and stealing from these rich tycoons or what have you, and then literally giving it away to poor people. So like they rob this diamond person and throw all the diamonds out the window to the impoverished communities around this area. They steal that money off the plane and literally let it all rain down on this poor community. So they're trying to establish this like Robin Hood thing, which to me, I'm like, that makes it way ethically. It makes it more ethically ambiguous. It makes it more difficult because it's like, right. Well, they're doing good. But then this movie doesn't get back to that at all. They set up this idea that it's a Robin Hood motif, but then they don't even touch it again. It's just like they're just giving it all away. And even to the point where like in the scene with the FBI head, what is it? Captain, whatever, boss person. We've already established like, okay, this is like a Robin Hood situation. Cool. That we know this. They've told us, they've talked about it already. And at a certain point, this boss person is like, so it's not about the money, it's about spiritual enlightenment. Okay, so you did already tell us earlier that it wasn't about the money. You cannot then go back and be like, wait, so it's not about the money? Because you were the one who told us that it wasn't about the money. Like,
right.
Don't, why would you do that? Like, this is bad writing.
I was thinking, okay, first of all, they're on this plane that has no armed guards, and the money's just there on pallets. Like, cool. That's how money works, I guess. That's how U.S.
I want a pallet of money.
Fucking weird. Okay, but like, if they're like, they are trying to say like they're doing this for the earth, right? So this is their act that they're giving back, right? So the diamonds, they gave them to the people. Okay, that's like cool. Like you said, Robin Hood. And then like when they go to do like their third one with the gold, and they're like trying to give the gold back to the earth, I was like, thought about that money palette one, and I was like, wait, but isn't that just littering? How is that giving back to the earth? Because like, sure, like that like impoverished community got a little bit of it, right? But like,
but That's why it feels like this movie doesn't know what it wants to be, because
Yeah.
again, the told narrative, the scripted narrative is essentially, we're giving back to the earth. We are what we're considering in this narrative as eco-terrorists. We care about the environment. We care about the earth more than we care about people. That's the deal. But that's not what's being presented off the bat. What's being presented off the bat is a Robin Hood structuring.
Mm-hmm.
So is it both? Because they're not really talking about giving to poor people. They're just talking about the earth. But we're seeing that they're giving to poor people, and it's intended. It's intended that they are giving this to these people. That's why we're seeing the shots of this like poor community. $100 bills are raining down. This other community, also visibly poor, is being given diamonds. It's like, yes, okay, you're framing these shots in a very particular way for us to understand. Yes, Robin Hood, cool, into it. But then later they're like, we're not Robin Hood, we're just Earth. And it's like, then why did you show us all this stuff? You told us that it was going to be this movie, and then you gave
Only
up.
show us wealth from that on.
Yeah, and then it's just this whole other Earth shit, and it's like, this movie doesn't know what it wants.
It's also like, okay, well, Mother Nature is going to give us all these things, and we're going to do it, and it's going to be awesome, right? But like, in order to do these incredible feats that they're talking about, they have to like use things that harm the environment, like motorcycles or planes. So it's like, send the chopper, like Mother Nature wanted.
Yachts.
Let's go to the Chrome House in the middle of the fucking mountain, right? And then there's like this, like, oh well, this doesn't belong to him, and I'm just like, what the fuck are you saying? You don't know anything. And like, they're trying to frame these people as like who are all like people of color, right? Like this surfer group this time, or surfer group, whatever. They are all people of color this time, and they're also environmental terrorists. I just have such a big problem with that, because it's like, we're now seeing environmental, like being concerned about the environment is bad because it's extremist, right?
It's bad because it's considered extremist. It's only considered extremist because it's anti-capitalism. And that's what they're trying to say, is like, they're trying to stop these big production companies from making these billions and billions and billions of dollars off of these things. And their whole deal is like, no, well, we're trying to protect the earth. And so then they're painted by the cops, who again in this movie are supposed to be heroes. These cops are painting these people who are trying to be of the earth and green energy and all of that as terrorists, because they are trying to dismantle these systems of wealth that only benefit this upper class, whilst also destroying the earth that we live on. So it's,
well, also participating in it, right?
Well, also participating in it, yeah.
Like, which is so messy, because like then they're just elevating themselves and like giving themselves a big ass pass. And I'm just like, okay, this doesn't know what it wants to be. And even like, so the Ozaki 8, right, is like, these 8 challenges that are called ordeals. I don't want to do anything that sounds like a whole ordeal. Do you? Holy shit, right? So like, they're invented by this dude Ozaki, and like, supposedly Ozaki is the one that also saved Samsara, who we'll talk about later, because I have a lot and nothing to say about her at the same time, because she's not in this movie. And then Bodhi was like his acolyte, right? But he completed the big thing in this movie is like, he died doing these challenges, and you can train your whole life and not be ready for them, despite the fact that Johnny Utah, a dirt bike trick rider dude, can do all of this with no training, and it's fine, right? But like, that guy that created these died doing the first one. But he didn't die doing the first one. He died giving an offering to the earth after he completed the first one, because he put his little boat in front of a big boat to try to save a whale. And that was his thing. And Bodhi is now an extremist and stuff because he was on that boat and he survived. What the fuck is that?
Again, it does not make sense. This movie doesn't make sense. This movie is so poorly written. You could have told me that this movie was XXX and I would have been like, yes. I am watching the movie XXX with Vin Diesel currently. Although I haven't seen that movie in a while, so I don't want to like degrade it that much. But from what I remember, not very good.
I don't remember.
It's probably really messy. So I don't want to be like,
but probably easier to follow.
Yeah, but at least with a bad story, there's a story, whereas this one's just so all over the place. And it's trying to remake the first one without any of the clever capture of like attention. It loses all attention because at least in the first one, when he's undercover, there are these moments of like when they're at the beach and Keanu gets in the fight and Gary Busey runs across the street and he's like, what's happening? When he confronts Bodhi and they're in that moment, there's that like, wait, is he gonna get caught? And then they play it off real cool and then they move past it. So there are these moments to remind you like, let's make sure they don't get caught. And like that's the attention grab. Like we're invested because these are moments of like, what's gonna happen? But in this one, you completely forget that he's undercover. Like he goes to this. Also,
he forgot he was undercover.
He goes to a fucking fight club, and you're like, what? And that's where they bond. And you're like, no, this is mess. This is a mess. I hate this. And then you don't see Papas or his partner for a literal hour and like 20 minutes. This is a movie about friends who do extreme sports and has nothing to do with the FBI or anything. There's no reminding that like that's happening, to the point where like he even forgets. Like it does seem like, oh, they forgot about this. Like you can't just ditch that whole premise and then like in this moment with the gold, that's when he picks up the gun and is like, FBI or and like police. And you're like, wait.
Yeah.
Nothing was earned. It was so disjointed and unearned. You went from scene to scene and each scene proved just nothing. Nothing about the last or moving the story forward. They're just in a new place this time. And it's like, we're going to this cabin where Steve Aoki's DJing and it's cool. And
there's lots of butts.
And there's lots of girls and we're just going to fuck. And you're like, cool. And then they're like, and then we're jumping off this cliff because it's a 6-second free fall and you either fly or die. No, you guys have squirrel suits and you're going to be flying for like 5 minutes. So that makes no sense. Also, what? And then it's like they're snowboarding and they're like, we can't go. And he's like, fuck this. I'm going to keep going. And then the guy dies and they're just like, he made his choice. And the death is so overlooked and also
a Viking funeral.
So poorly like it feels, and this is my own opinion. This is my opinion. It feels so poorly directed because the reactions to all the deaths, I mean, maybe that's the choice. Maybe the choice is deaths don't really matter in this world. Just keep going. And if that be the case, cool. I didn't get it. Also, no. But the character choice is to be like, well, he's gone. He's just gone, man. What do you mean he's gone? Well, he made his choice. And we're just going to move on because he's gone now. And he's like, no, that was... Yeah. And then they're just at the Steve Aoki DJ party. And you're like...
Where their friend is literally... His body is burning outside.
And that's the party. And you're just like, what the fuck is happening?
The editing, the dialogue, the story, everything
is
so atrocious for this. And... they spent all of their money because a lot of this was shot like on location. They spent all of their fucking money on
all over
like,
the world,
you know, because a lot of these people that did the stunts and everything are like extreme sports people. They spent all their fucking money on that, right? Which is like, all right, cool. Like, why don't you make sure you have like a coherent fucking story? Is that so?
Well,
oh my god!
Also,
like, I know that's wild. I know that's a wild concept, but like. Holy shit. And they like you said, they want to like, they really try to hone in on every person makes their choice, right? Every person makes their choice. And with Bodhi specifically, I have a huge problem with how they were trying to frame him, because they were trying to say he looks down on Johnny because Johnny let the death of his friend dictate the direction of his life, right? He's like, I don't care that you were sponsored by all these people. I don't fucking care. Like, that's fine. That's your choice. But you let this person's death, you know, decide your fate. And that's fucked. And in that same way, what he's doing is the same tactic that Bodhi used in the first one, but on a weirder fucking level, where he's just like, he's demeaning him and basically saying you are nothing and you shouldn't follow anybody, but you should follow me, right? And that is absolutely gaslighting. So like, he's like, and he's deluded himself into thinking that is not gaslighting, right? And I'm just like, wait, what are you talking about?
I do want to point out one script moment that I thought was genius.
Ooh.
And by genius, I mean very, very bad, but very fun. Oh, yeah. You know exactly what line it is. He says... there comes a point. What do you mean? It's when where you reach the point. What point? The point break. And
the point where you break.
Whereas previously, A point break has everything to do with
Surfing.
tides and waves and surfing. And it makes sense for it to be called Point Break. There's very little surfing in this movie. So they've switched the meaning of Point Break to being a breaking point. And the way this is set up, it feels like such a, like, oh man, yeah, here's the hero shot. Here's the hero line. Like, shut up. That's so silly.
Did you read that article I sent you where they were
I
just
did.
like, you watch this movie and you're like, they're basically eye fucking underneath the water for 10 minutes, right? And so I'm just like, oh, they're so proud of that. And then like there's these moments where you're like, you know that they like pat each other on the back and they're like, that's so fucking good. Good fucking job. That's so good, man.
Yeah.
And even like the actors and like just everybody involved with this movie was like, man, this is so good. This is so spiritual. Like the woman that played Samsara, who was literally in it for 5 fucking minutes. And I'm sorry, 3 of those 5 fucking minutes, she was fucking the main character. Like, okay. But she saw her character as like an oracle for like the group, but like the whole time I'm like, why is she there? What is she to these people? And then it's like, okay, Ozaki saved you when you were a kid. Why are you here? Like, she didn't add anything. She wasn't anything to anybody in this movie.
No. So I came to a realization at a certain point. This movie just feels like, you know, that conversation at a party with like some straight cis white dude who's like, I just want to go off the grid.
Oh yeah.
So it's this concept, and by go off the grid, they mean that they want to live in a society where their actions they're not held accountable for their own actions. So by going off the grid, they want no responsibility and no recourse for their shitty beliefs. And it's this idea like, oh, I want to just go back to a time where men could be men, like that kind of idea of like where violence is language and brutishness is like a badge of honor. Like the more brutish you are, the more strength you have. Where women are servants and not people, where something like cancel culture doesn't exist. And like all of this language that I'm using, like this very specific, I just want to be a problematic cis white man and I don't want to be held accountable for my actions and I don't want to change. And also I don't want to learn. This movie, it carries within itself that ethos. That's what this movie's about. The whole time where it's like,
says, we live on the grid just on our terms. We change the grid.
Yeah, which is, I mean, on your term, what do you mean? The grid is literally made for you, asshole. like you literally have every fucking privilege in this world because the grid was designed to accommodate you. But okay. So now you want to like bounce because it's getting kind of hard, like other people have it. Cool. It's gross, and I don't like it, and I think it's a bad movie, and I just don't like what the vibe is trying to do, and it's so like that Fight Club shit where like that's his initiation is to fight, and he's like, I see that you have strength, and so you're a man now. Like this is a test to prove that you're a man with a penis, and I'm like, why? What is the reason for this story? Just to pat men on the back and like to not cry about when friends die, and to make sure that like you know that men can climb things and hit rocks with other rocks and grunt and smell and fear for their own safety even when it's literally a pointless scenario. Like, shut the fuck up. This movie's so silly. This movie's bad and pointless and boring and toxic and just, this is a terrible movie. It's a terrible movie. It's fucking awful.
It really is. There was like, every time I thought that it couldn't get worse, it got worse.
It gets
worse.
worse.
At a certain point, I got like, it was just like, okay, fine. And I was like, just laughing at it. I was like, I can't fucking believe they made this choice, right? Like the Point Break thing that we talked about. And then like at about an hour in, it just changed. And it wasn't even like funny in a bad, like, this is unbelievable way. It got just the way that it doubled down on a lot of the problematic shit and like just went like, they didn't need to explain why Johnny Utah got his name. That did not need to happen. And then literally they explain it. And Johnny's mom is an indigenous person to Utah, right? So they don't say indigenous. They don't say Native American. They say Indian. My mom is a Utah Indian is what he says. And then everybody called me Ute, and then they called me Utah, and then it was Johnny Utah just stuck. So this is 2015. Like, there is no way that you can't not know what this is. And he has like a bunch of tribal tattoos too. So this is them trying to validate that and trying to do this. And I'm like, you can't even fucking use proper terminology. Like, you're gonna make this white ass guy like an indigenous, like,
yeah, like it's trying to represent Native people in this way. That's, I mean, not only did you not do any homework and you're just a racist piece of shit colonizer, but you're also trying to do some sort of pseudo-inclusive exposition for a backstory as to say, like, oh, this person's Native. Shut up. Like, stop. Yeah, but to me, like, that is so, like, when that happened, that it was just so unsurprising, because in my head I'm like, yeah, this is a story for those off-the-grid cis guys who just, like, I mean, they hate women, but they're mad because they can't say it now. Like, I don't know, like, they want to say the N-word when they rap to songs. Like, that's, like, this movie for those guys who are just, like, everything's a problem now, and fuck, and I don't know. I'm so unsurprised by its reckless use of language, its reckless narrative. Like, it's so unsurprising, and it's just so emblematic of cis male straight white guys. Like, just the ethos of the patriarchy is this movie, and this idea of, like, extreme sports, and you can only bond when you're in when you face near death, like when they all hug after that big cliff jump and they're in those squirrel suits and they're like, yeah, we're bonded for life. Oh, fuck, like, we almost died, so now we can cry and, like, say we love each other because fuck. And I just, like, wow,
they just have, like, a big boner for adrenaline.
Which, again, is, like, to some degree, I'm like, live your life. Whatever gets you going, whatever kink you got, go for it. Obviously not cannibalism. Arnie, oh, go off. But, like, sure. But it's more than just, like, extreme sports for these people. It's just, it's reiterating all of these toxic traits and what is imbued upon male-presenting people under the patriarchy and what's expected of them. It's not even necessarily imbued. It's like what's expected. And for that adherence of procedure within it, you're given the privilege of maleness and male privilege underneath that umbrella. So it's like, it's reinstilling these things and making you remember, like, yeah, this is what men are. There are two genders, and this is what the male gender is. And we have wieners and blood and fight, and I'm not going to cry. He chose to die. And you're like, I don't fucking care. This is such a this is not a story. This is not, they tried to do something here and did nothing. And I also like that article that you sent where the director said he didn't watch the first one and didn't look towards the source material.
And you're like, oh, that tracks.
At all, because he wanted to be inspired by this new idea of it. I'm like, oh, yeah, so you're doing a remake of something without the source material.
That doesn't make sense. I hate it when people do that.
But again, to me, I'm like, of course this director did that.
Yeah.
That is such a fucking male ego thing. That's such a masculine thing to do. And just like, yeah, I don't need it. No, I don't need it. We got it. We can just do it. And you're just like, shut up.
Also, for him to, like, try to, because, like, I was the whole time just completely confused as to, like, what the intersectionality between extreme sports and environmental activists is, because, like, those are in absolute contradiction to each other, or at least in the way that they are going about it, where they're using a helicopter to get up here and they're using this to do this, and, like, the whole thing is just isn't them trying to commune with nature, it's them trying to fucking dominate it, but they are so thick that they can't understand that that's what they're trying to do. And it's like,
they're trying to come, like, from adrenaline. That's it. That's all they're worried about.
That's literally it. Yeah.
This is like, okay, cool.
And they're like, well, nobody else has done this, so I'm gonna do this, right? It's like all of the nuance from the first one and all of the stuff that we liked about it. Like, you cannot fucking make a remake or something from not, like, seeing the source material or reading it or, like, having a frame of reference for it. And so, like, why not just call it something else? Make a different fucking movie.
If you're just going to go that derivative, change the name. It's super easy. And I also,
I mean,
I don't want to knock the process of writing because I know how hard writing is, and I get it. It's hard. This script took 3 years to develop. Why? Why did you make this movie? Why did you do that? You obviously had no direction. It took you 3 years to finalize this piece of shit. What's the reason? Why'd you do it? Like what? I don't understand. It sucked, man. It's not a good movie.
Fuck this movie.
Fuck this movie.
And we're back. Cool. So, Eric.
Yeah.
We rode the big wave and we survived somehow. I don't know. I was trying to transition and it didn't work.
We rode the Point Break to our breaking point.
Oh my God. That's so gross.
Yeah, okay. It sucks.
So the 1991 version
yes.
with Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
And Patrick Swayze.
Yes.
Who was it for?
I was going to say cops. No. It was for, surfers, I guess. It feels, no, surfers. You know what? Fuck it. Surfers. It's for surfers. That's it. I'm spending too much time thinking about it. I'm just going to say it's for surfers. Who do you think it was for?
I always forget that we're going to ask this question. And so, like, right after the pod, every time, I'm always like, I'm going to have a better answer for next time.
Mm-hmm.
But this one for sure was for men. Like, I cannot think, like, it is for surfers because surfers are also men, right?
Yes.
But there's just so much talk about dick and, like, just, this is better than sex and the whole thing. And it's like, it's for men in Southern California. Yeah, I think that feels correct.
Yeah. It's also for cops. It's like
also
that's also
cops,
it's also it's for at the end of the day it's for Keanu Reeves' character. It's for the cop surfer guy.
Oh, the intersectionality of cop and surfer and man.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's for
that's it.
That sweet little sweet spot.
Did you like it?
I did. I think Point Break is a good movie. Genuinely, again, like we talked about before, like for the structural nuance, obviously there's a lot that it did wrong and it got messy and reiterates all these things. But overall, was I engaged and entertained the whole time? Absolutely. Did I think generally it was a cool story? Yeah. I liked it. I thought it was good. I'd never seen it before. And so this is my first viewing. And so there's a level of like hypeness that people get for these classics. And so going into it with like this is considered a classic. Let's see what's happening. It's very good. I did like Point Break. What do you think? Did you like Point Break?
I loved Point Break.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen this before, and before it was always like, yeah, this is good. Like, this is cool. Like, this is chill. Rewatching it this time, and, like, especially after talking to you, and, like, that's one of the things that I love about doing this pod is sometimes, like, being able to talk to another human being about the story and everything in this really deep and big analytical way.
Yeah.
I like it more because, like, I realized the nuances to some of the writing that were just so good. I think this movie, especially for the 1990s, it got more right than it got wrong, I think.
Yeah.
And I really loved it.
It's good.
It's a great movie. Also,
movie.
Keanu Reeves, when he's surfing for the first time and he eats shit, I was like, I feel you. Because, like, I ate shit recently on my new skates, and I was like, I couldn't sit down for, like, 4 weeks because I broke my butt. No,
so
I just,
right
like, sprained a muscle or something. But, yeah, I think it was great. And I will watch it again. Do I think that the ending sucked? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I think that Tyler deserved better? Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Great. What about 2015? Was it new, interesting, or the same? Progressive, regressive? And how has the story evolved with today's ideals?
So I think it was regressive. I think it was different because it was boring and bad. I think it evolved with today's ideals in the sense of adding the big air quotes eco-terrorism aspect to make it more of like a Earth crisis story about how global warming is happening and they're trying to save the Earth. that's more of a recent conversation. So I guess it's modern in that way. And I guess it's new I guess it's new. It's not interesting. And it's bad. It's bad, 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 bad.
Yeah. Everything that you just said. It's regressive. It's bad. Like, on top of that eco-terrorism thing, like, they're also trying, like, they're showing that from such a position of wealth that wasn't there before. Like, this was like the like the supposed to be like this sexy rich version, like, that's also darker and grittier. And yeah, like, that wealth just really did not have a place there in that kind of story, especially if you're going to try to go like talk about like environmentalism and all this other stuff. I'm like, wow, this sucks. But like, also then to like add like this glorification of the, because it tried to add like this commentary on social media, and like where it said, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody puts it on YouTube, did it really happen? And I was just like, oh my God, okay, boomer.
I do want to know if YouTube sponsored this movie, because they did say they said the name YouTube, I believe, around 10 times, which is kind of unprecedented, because YouTube does not come up that organically. Ever. So he's like, I was a YouTube star. Are you the YouTube star? If a tree falls and it's not on YouTube, does it? Anyways, why'd you join the FBI and quit YouTube? Like, what?
This movie also just really wanted to date itself too, which is fine with me because nobody's ever going to see it again.
Yeah.
You now get to tell me who it was for.
It was for Monster Energy enthusiasts.
Excellent. A+.
Thank you. Who do you think it was for?
It was for them and for YouTube enthusiasts.
Oh, see, yeah. If you cover the YouTube base.
This is
we're set.
It's for them, while simultaneously being for the people that are against social media and want to be off the grid. So just like this movie couldn't decide what it wanted to do with characters, it couldn't decide who it was for.
Yeah, that is true. Canon.
Cool.
Did
you like it?
No, unequivocally no. It's garbaggio. It's awful and not fun and not cool. Unequivocally bad, without question or recourse. If I say that, is that a word? Maybe.
Ooh.
What did you think?
Oh, it was awful. I give this a -4 out of 5 stars.
That's a fair score.
Yeah, this was just a very, very, very bad movie. And nobody should ever have to sit through it.
It delivered in one way.
The point?
It allowed us to find our breaking point.
Shit.
So I guess there is a level of achievement to be celebrated in that it did its due diligence in its titular activity. So shout out to Point Break the remake in succeeding in that aspect. Thank you, Point Break. You really nailed it.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everybody.
Look at us.
This was wild. So
yeah,
thank you for listening. We mentioned it on the last pod, but we wanted to mention again that we now have a Patreon.
Woo!
So if you would like to support us and everything we do here, we would be forever grateful. You can find that at patreon.com/NOTstalgia. You can subscribe for as little as $3 a month. So
yeah,
go off.
Just go for it. And we officially recorded a NOTstalgia episode, so you have content waiting for you if you so choose to unlock that tier.
We talk about misogyny in the Lord of the Rings, which I watched all 6 of them, and Eric has been reading books on screenwriting.
And I talk about how white screenwriters need to stop idolizing Chinatown, like Chinatown the film. It's a fun listen. It's very casual and very cute. It's more casual, which is fun. So if you want to hear us talk about that silly stuff, go listen. I mean, we're going to obviously just be loading it with a ton of content. So every other week, it's just going to be a new episode. So Say you wait a little while and you get there and you're like, I have 6 episodes of this juicy ass show to listen to. That's crazy. But it won't be crazy. It'll be reality for you, for being a patron and a subscriber, a patron of the arts, because we're artists and this is art. So thank you.
Art. Don't forget to rate and review us if you haven't already. We love you, love you, love you. You can follow us on all of the social media. Artwork and music by Eric Lefebvre, editing by Danny Barkley. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess. Remember to go check out the NOTstalgia Network. Check out our other shows. Go read my blog. We're going to put more blog shit up there too. It's going to be cute, but NOTstalgiaNetwork.com. It's really cute. It's a very fun site. Spend time on it. Just hang out. We're going to make it a social network any day now. It's going to be very cute.
Thanks for listening. We love you. And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, 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 bye-bye. This podcast has been brought to you by the NOTstalgia Network.
Visit thenotStalgiaNetwork.com for more.
Hey everybody, I'm Eric.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Jake.
And we are the band Lousy Advice from the Lousy Advice Podcast.
Come listen as we draft artist and genre-centric best of lists.
With the help of our closest friends.
These lists are canon.
And there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it.
From Misfits to Cher.
Green Day to Gaga.
Or Pup to Paramore.
Listen to the Lousy Advice Podcast now, or else.
Stream us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the NOTstalgia Network, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget that we are the band Lousy Advice, and this is our podcast, the Lousy Advice Podcast.
The Lousy Advice Podcast?
The Lousy Advice Podcast.